PMP, how are you doing?
What's going on, Dr. Thunder? What you been up to, man?
I'm all right, man.
See, you got a huge lineup, man. I see you got a lot of people coming on.
Yeah, it's been very interesting, very engaging, really great conversations. My last interview was with, Pocket Watching with JT.
Yes,
and
sir.
we talked about strong Black fathers. Before that, I interviewed, let's see here, Minister Jap, and that was a nice spicy conversation, and we got into some really interesting topics. I interviewed BGS Ibmore, Now if you go back like several months, I interviewed Donovan Sharp and O'Shea Duke Jackson, and I interviewed Red Sings the Blues. That's actually how we met.
Yes, sir. That's a huge lineup, though, man. That's a crazy lineup. I need to get like you. And you know, Minister Jap is always gonna have some spice in there. He always interesting because he gonna bring some heat.
You know, the thing about Jap is that his research method is different, but you can't argue with the conclusions. You know, he's very astute. He's well read. He's studied a lot of stuff. And in that interview, we kind of talked about some of his history with the Nation of Islam and with 5 Percenters, and so this is like a heavy dude. He's not just a guy telling jokes. Really deep thinking guy. The name of that episode was "But is the straight, free-thinking Black man protected?"
Yeah, that's a good question right there. That's a good question. Now, you know, that's a hot topic, right? It ain't a hot topic. It's a controversial topic nowadays, but it's a good question to ask. It's a good question to ask.
So I watched a couple of your last videos, because I've been watching your videos anyway. I mean, and it seems that since we were on that panel together on Red Sings the Blues channel, that you gained like another 50,000 subscribers. I'm like, goodness gracious.
Yeah, I think I honestly think, I'm sorry if that's on my end, but I'm gonna try to put that over there. All right, but I honestly think that it's just because I hit a couple topics that a lot of people don't want to say. And it was really interesting about it is you could almost be talentless nowadays in this current market and still go further because you're willing to say things that other people want to say, but they can't because they have, you know, a job or whatever it may be. So I did a video my first video that did 1 million views. It was on basically men versus women in sports. And for me being an athlete, I don't know if you guys know, but for the audience, I represented the USA National Rugby Sevens team on the international stage multiple times. So I have a bronze Pan American Games medal from 2019. So I'm experienced in sports, and just from me being experienced in sports, I thought that was universal. And it turns out that if you make a video on it, you can get 1 million views because you're saying something that's controversial. And I thought that it was just a regular fact that men would definitely beat women if we competed in sports. So I guess that's why that video did so well. I don't know.
Well, actually, it's so not even close to being a competition or a contest there. It's such a non-contest. I mean, high school, I'm trying to be generous here.
Yeah.
High school athletes would beat professional, women athletes.
Exactly. I had I actually even had a college coach, because I train every single day. So I'm at the track, and the college track teams out there, sometimes they ask me for advice. Sometimes they ask me for help on certain things, the women's team. But the coach comes up to me and he's like, I woke up this morning and in my recommend, it's probably because it was about sports, and he looks up a lot of things about sports, and that's how the algorithm works on YouTube. So he's seen the video and he goes, well, you're absolutely right. And nobody's allowed to say that. And he's a coach of a women's team, and he understands, all the women understand too, that they wouldn't even want to compete against men because they all know that they would get absolutely destroyed. And you're not allowed to say that, I guess, but you would think that that's the truth. But how these groups work, though, is they make it so that you can't say certain things, so the public that are less informed about these topics and are busy working 40 hours a week, they don't have the time to look into these topics. So when you can't talk about certain things, you can promote a certain propaganda, a dogma, without kind of any confliction. And that's pretty much how they're getting a lot of their power. And so I think it takes people and pages and YouTube channels like us that say, no, we're just gonna be honest, and hopefully someone's listening. And generally speaking, you see that a lot of people are. So it's good to see, but I'm not sure of how much actual progress we're making, you know, in terms of trying to turn the ship around here. I think that we get in an echo chamber where we start to think that we might be making more progress because all we see is pretty much people that kind of have similar opinions. But then when I go out and I look on TikTok, I see people losing their minds. Like, we have like 106 genders now. You can just be a tomato or whatever it is you feel like in the morning, I guess, and people are buying it. So, I mean, you know, I hope that we're making some kind of progress with the reasonable folks at least. And I hope more reasonable people start to talk about these things, because without that conversation, this stuff is just going to thrive. And eventually it's just going to put us in a weird spot, I think. So it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. You know, you're talking about folks being willing to say inconvenient truths, and not bending the knee. And one person that comes to mind when we think of that right now, especially, is Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I don't want to get too personal about it, but okay, there's a person that I know that just told me that they are two genders, right? In the morning they're a guy, and at night they're a girl. And this person is very young, and I was like, if you think that you're a guy, that's cool, but this person had just started getting involved in having sexual intercourse. They're at around that age. But I'm like, if you continue to do the things that you're doing, you're going to find out very quick that you're a girl. That's how it works. And in Dave Chappelle's stand-up, I thought he did such a good job at illustrating the fact that the civil rights movement has just been, I mean, it's been taken by every single group that has any kind of quote unquote oppression. And then the first example they use all the time is the African-American struggle in America. And that just makes no sense to me, because they're just not relative a lot of the time. So it's really weird, but I thought he did a great job at defending his points. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. And most recently, you know, he agreed to meet with some of the folks that were having issues with, you know, his stand-up. And he met with them, but he told him he's not changing anything. Right. He's not going to change his position. He's not bending the knee. He's not kowtowing. You know, and I have a certain kind of respect for him. I did an episode on my live streaming show called Thunder's Thoughts, and it was on this sort of Dave Chappelle topic, and we called the show "Get the Bag, Then Speak Truth to Power."
Yeah.
And it was actually sort of a bit of a play on words, because what we were actually saying was that if you wait until you have money, it's likely that you'll never stand up for anything, because you'll have too many. That's right. You'll have too many, too many bad habits.
Yeah.
You've been kissing butts. You know, you've been brown nosing for all this time. You don't just wake up and get a backbone because now you're secure. That's not the way it works. And in the Bible, it even talks about being faithful in the little things, and right, then more will be added. But for some reason, folks seem to think that if you, if they somehow, if their life was different, if they had, if they could just get past this next hump, this next struggle, whatever it is, then everything is going to be different. But that's not the way that it works. The way it works is, so Dave had walked away from 50 million. Okay, so that shows a certain kind of character.
Yeah.
So he walked away, and 50 million is 50 million.
Okay, so it sounds good to me. Look, it sounds good to
me. 50 million is 50 million. I don't care if you have a billion. I don't care if you have 10 billion. 50 million is 50 million. And the way that someone gets to a billion is that 50 million means a lot. A million means a lot. $100 means a lot.
Absolutely.
So that's how you get there. And
thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
How you get there. And so he had already walked away from 50 million. And I remember seeing him in an interview where he was criticizing Hollywood. He was criticizing Hollywood for.
Was that the Oprah interview?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I seen
where
that.
He said he's never putting a dress on.
Yeah.
And how they have all these comedians. I challenge you to try to find a successful comedian, except for Dave.
Oh, I've seen the dress.
On.
I've seen the dress thing before, and I think it was Cat Williams that spoke about it too, maybe. But you look at Chris Tucker, they got him. You look at what's the big strong dude that's always in the media for talking. What's his name? He be dancing. He was in White Chicks. The bald dude, you know what I'm talking about. Old Spice commercial. He always bouncing his pecs.
Yeah. Terry Crews.
I can't think of his name for some reason, but they got him. They got Martin Lawrence and they got Martin Lawrence in Big Mama's House or whatever. Tyler Perry, and I salute to what Tyler Perry's been doing in terms of having $1 billion empire, But it does seem that in every case there's a black dude in a dress. Anytime he wants to be funny,
I'll tell you where that comes from. It's a direct attempt at emasculating black men that goes back to minstrel shows and prior to minstrel shows. So it's not it's you can get some laughs or whatever, but it's not a positive thing.
Right. Did you know that? Did you ever hear about what happened to Denzel? How he got his start? When they were at his first movie, when he got his first big role, they told him that on the cut, because he was going to be like a comedy guy. They told him that they wanted him to pose in a noose on the front of the to make the role on the cover of the movie, and it was a room full of Jewish producers. And in the interview, he said he wouldn't do it, and he was like, "Would you get into a shower with gas in it, smiling and making jokes?" And he said no. So I demand that same kind of respect, and I think that's what ultimately kind of set his career in the path that it went, because generally speaking, once you fall into that role, that's the role you get, so once he stood on his moral ground, it did well for his career too, just like Dave Chappelle. So
a little bit of a sidetrack that reminds me of I watch The Office. I'm constantly watching The Office. Like it goes, I play through the whole season and then I start back over again and keep, it's just a lot of common humor and there's some nostalgia associated with it because of the time period that originally that series was on TV. But I remember Andy, so the new boss was coming in, and Andy did something clumsy, really clumsy, and stuff flew all over the place, and he was struggling to try to get some sort of connection with the boss. But when he was clumsy and stuff fell all over the place, the boss laughed. So then the next time he sees him, he just self-imposes this goofy thing, and he just does something silly, and then and then you can see the look on his face because he realizes this is his life now.
Right.
Now he's going to have to be the jokester,
the goofy guy. And that's what I'm like. I watch shows like I tried to watch The Chi and I liked it, but I watched it. I don't know if you've heard of The Chi before, but it's a show. It's a pretty good show, and it's a big show. But like, now that I'm into the masculinity and I'm starting to understand how this stuff is set up and how black men in particular are demasculinized in these movies and shows, I'm like, okay, so we got this show. None of the black men in the show have anything together. They have nothing going for themselves. One of the guys has a food truck, but he's living under his wife. And he's trying to get by on the food truck. He's doing a good job with that, but ultimately he has to answer to his wife for everything. His wife is selling out the community by gentrifying the neighborhood. And the only guy that kind of has it together is like a 20-year-old kid, but he has 5 kids or like 4 kids, right? And then we got like another black dude he just got out of jail. He has trauma, and he's trying to get this woman to fall in love with him, but he has no job, so she has to support him. And I'm like, where are any of the like? We don't get one good representation in this entire show that's full of black people, and it happens so many times. That's why I really like Django. Like, that's honestly, I'm a big movie guy, right? I love good movies, and this guy, it's got to be in my top 10, if not top 10, top 15, because it was the first time you seen a movie where not only was it in the time of slavery, that also plays a part in it, but it was a time where a black man in particular, was straight, and he wouldn't accept no for an answer in defending his family. And I mean, why can't we have more of that, right? It was a great movie in every regard, and I think that was one of the reasons why I liked it a lot, because we just don't see that, man. I watched what was that last movie, Boogie or Candyman? Every movie, it's always a gay black dude, and I'm like, they only make up like 5% of the population. They're not gonna be in every single movie. But now we got every single superhero, every single Marvel movie. And again, I know someone's gonna clip this and go, oh, PMP is whatever. I'm not homophobic. I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. I'm just saying here, you don't see that there's a common denominator and all this stuff. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, I don't know. And I wonder where it's going. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting because the homophobia thing, the way that is applied so generously to everything, it's not what the word means.
Yeah.
You know, even if I did have some sort of bias against, you know, homosexual people, that's still not homophobia, because there would be some sort of fear associated with it. Like,
right. But you know you can't, like, Dr. Thunder, you say that nowadays and they get on you. They always change the definition of these words. So now homophobia isn't having a fear of a homosexual person. It is to now somehow degrade or insult a homosexual person, I guess. So anything could just be homophobic, and that's how they play the game. It's such an obvious game that nobody's waking up to. They're incrementally taking our freedom of speech and to the point where we can't say anything to talk about the topics, and then they're going to take over that way. And that's just how the game goes. It's no longer about what you intend when you say anything. It's now only about how you feel when I say it. You know what I mean? I can't really affect how you feel when I say something. I can only control my own intentions, but nobody really cares about my intentions when I say it. They only care about how the other person feels. That's right. Insane to me, man.
Yeah, I did a episode of Thunder's Thoughts called "What's Wrong with the Pyramid of White Supremacy," and it was a video review of a clip of Jordan Peterson, where they were talking about the pyramid of racism. And the pyramid, what it is it starts on the bottom with pretty innocuous kind of, you know, statements like, you know, I don't see race, you know, color has not been a serious way that I, you know, evaluate people's character, or, you know, stuff like that. And then as it goes up there, so, you know, spoiler alert, at the top is genocide. So, the problem with
that got dark quick, but that is at the top,
right. Right. So the problem with the pyramid, and they discuss this in detail, is that first of all, it was something that they were exposing to kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so grade school kids. All right, so that was the first issue. So all of your conversation needs to have at least enough nuance and specificity to communicate clearly what is right and what is wrong. But there's a lot of vagueness and ambiguity. So what ended up happening was that all the kids, rather than becoming more open-minded about other people and stuff like this, they just restricted themselves to a safe list of words. Okay, and so now they were using the buzzer jargon, the the stuff that you're allowed to say that's in the Overton window, all of the really safe stuff. So they just started using this really narrow list of words to describe everything. And so a couple things were happening. They didn't learn anything. All they learned is how to be better, more effective racists.
Yeah.
Because now they learned how to hide.
Yeah, that's what happens. Like, if there's somebody that's racist, let me know so I can stay away. If you don't want black people to eat your pie, or you see whites only pies, if you don't want black folks to eat your pie, that's cool. I got enough money. I can go get a pie from somebody somewhere else where they appreciate me. But let me know. I'd rather know than to fund an organization that could potentially be racist because they can't say anything about it. I'd rather you tell me if you don't want me in your establishment. So I've always been for just being open about those things. I think that to modify hate speech is important to some degree, but there also has to be window for the conversation, or else, dogma is going to appear. And anytime you look at other countries that are very strict, I don't want to name any for the sake of things on YouTube, bigger countries, competition to America, I think you can tie that in, and countries with that have South Korea, but the other one, like, the first thing they do is they moderate speech. That's the first thing you do. Yep. Automatically, because you understand that if there aren't certain words. Okay, there was I think her name is Naomi Park, or I forgot what it was. It was the woman that escaped from North Korea. And what she said, it was really interesting to me. She said that when they asked her about love, she didn't really even understand the concept of love because they never really used the word. So while they may have felt something, they never identified the emotion. So even with parents, they only had the quote unquote love for the supreme leader. And it was just really interesting to me that it got to the point their selection, their like you say, that narrow list of words was so narrow that they didn't have one for love. And when they didn't have one for love, it seemed that people were less likely to feel that emotion. You know what I mean? So I think that, man, it's a reason why it's the First Amendment is what I'm saying. And I think that it's a really important one. And I'm a talk until they take me away. So.
Well, it used to be that you had at least three regularly you saw in these careers, these kinds of jobs, people that would be outspoken and were willing to put their neck out and said all of these inconvenient things, and comedians, of course. The second one was ministers. Mm-hmm. And the third one was academics. Yeah. Now, I'm an academic, and the idea here is that tenure, the purpose of tenure was so that you could go wherever the research led, and you could discuss with whomever you'd like, and whatever topics that you would like, to your satisfaction, without being harassed, without the risk of losing your job. And now the way that they get rid of you, if you become too inconvenient, is they will just start to make your job so untenable and start hoisting upon you extra responsibilities and things, or they'll do like they do to some of the public school teachers in New York State, where they get they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and because of the strength of the teachers union, they can't get fired. So they send them to a place where they sit in a room and read a book all day.
It's crazy. That's insane. So, is that they did that to the teachers in New York?
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, it's not just in New York. There's other places around the country where if you get caught doing certain things. Now, I'm not saying that they were all innocent. What I'm saying is they have a mechanism in place that they could do away with you if you were one of these people that was talking a lot of this inconvenience.
You got a little
stuff.
Mouthy, right? If you got a little mouthy,
right.
Started talking a little too much.
Yeah. So I want to digress a bit. You were talking about Denzel's willingness to, or unwillingness to represent his people in that manner with the noose around his neck and whatnot. I remember watching Kevin Samuels and I think I'm going to do an episode on this. And Kevin was talking about how we need to, as black people, need to start refusing to do certain roles in Hollywood, because there's this constant making excuses that unless we do these roles, we can't work our way up, we can't get to these other roles. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that, look, if enough of us started saying no, I'm not doing the shucking and jiving, I'm not going to be doing the Tommen, I'm not going to be in there, talking about watermelon and chicken and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's just not going to be what I'm doing. And so if those are the kind of roles that you have for me, and I'm not putting a dress on, okay? So if those are the kind of roles that you have for me, then I'm not going to play those roles.
Yeah.
And if enough folks say no, then, eventually they would have to start changing, because, you got to have some black people. Right. Movies. I know.
Yeah, but no, you have a good point. And that was one of my biggest disappointments in my criticisms towards Tyler Perry. Once he got his $1 billion, $1 billion, now he has the new studio. I'm like, okay, so are we, in the last show, we got this girl that's a guy that I wasn't even sure until the end of it if they was playing a guy or a girl in the actual show, and it was just like a mix-up. And I'm like, Tyler Perry, man, you have a huge platform right now where you can promote other black artists and other black actors and actresses and put us out there in a positive light, and we're still using this same kind of drama-filled theme. That's why I'm interested in a lot of the stuff Jordan Peele's doing. Like when I think it was called Us, one of the movies, it had a black man in there, and he was a pretty masculine black man. He had a family. He took care of his family. He was funny. It was a good movie. But the man got to keep his masculinity and be funny. And I thought that was a good, why can't you portray us in the same ways that other races are portrayed? And I just think that we have a problem with getting on code right now. We obviously have the resources to do whatever we want to do as African Americans in America. We have the money, we just spend it on other things, and we're just not on code. Like, even if you look at our athletics, imagine if we just got all this together and just made our own like little section, a little town or something, right? Where we have a college in that town where all the best athletes come to that college instead of going to Alabama or instead of going to Florida or, what is it? PWIs, predominantly white colleges. If they went to that school that's in this town, how much money that would bring in. This college team would dominate the NCAA. It would bring plenty of eyes. And if you as the NFL want to come in and take athletes from this school, you have to do business with African American people in this town, right? So like little things like that, we could take our music industry there, a lot of our culture. Like when I went to Africa, when I went to Europe, when I went to England, Scotland, everywhere I go in the world, the most I see African American culture. And I say specifically African Americans because we're such a small category of people here, yet our influence reaches out so far. I went to Hong Kong and they're playing rap music. You know what I'm saying? So it's like all of that's going everywhere and we're not getting any say in it. We're not controlling the narrative. We're not controlling the image that we put out. We don't even control any of the money. We could create our own little town where all this stuff happens and people would have to come to that town or city to do business with us. And I just feel like we just, as a collective, like Kevin Samuel said, need to get on some kind of code or have some kind of agreement amongst each other, at least some kind of 10 commandments, I don't know, just some kind of like law that we all follow where we at least treat each other with decency. Like we can all, there's plenty of money to go around, and I think we have the resources to do it, and we damn sure have the talent to do it. We just got to put it together.
So one of our issues is, I think the last time this is the most recent number, but our community, we spend $1.7 trillion. $1.7 trillion annually. But it's so diffused in outward. It's not inward. We're not developing ourselves. Our dollar only, lasts 6 hours.
Yeah, it was like in our community, right? While other communities keep their dollar in the community by spending it with like local businesses in that community.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what got this whole thing started, of course, was slavery, but most of these issues had been resolved by the time we got all the way up to the civil rights movement. If you look at the marriage rate in the black community, it was as high or higher than other communities. If you look at the out of wedlock birth rate, it was very low. Now that rate was actually a little higher than it was in other communities, but every community was super low at that time. And but what really messed us up was this forced integration.
Yeah.
So if you did integration in a level manner, in a balanced way, then you would have also been moving white folks out of their neighborhoods into our neighborhoods. But that's not what happened. They just took us and put us different places. And so before we had to trust each other for business, we kept our money in our own neighborhoods. You had Black Wall Street, and there were dozens of Black Wall Streets. We kept that money in our communities. But after that, now our money is totally, it's just wild and crazy. It just goes wherever it is, and we're spending money on all kind of frivolous stuff. I heard Boyce Watkins mention something. Well, there's two things I want to talk about that he mentioned. I saw one of his tweets. I'll say this one first. We'll talk about the second point, and then we'll digress back to the first. But the first point that he made was that there was a study, a Harvard study, that showed that there's no evidence that jab or no jab, that there is any sort of reduction of communicability or folks, getting this, this DVOC, 91 DVOC. Shout out to Donovan Sharp. And
you gotta play the words on YouTube.
That's right. 91 DVOC. So now the reason I brought that up is because the video that I saw Boyce in, he was talking about how these athletes, we got a lot of very wealthy athletes. What if all the athletes just said, you know what? I'm not messing with this jab. Or it doesn't even have to be the jab. It could be anything. It could just be like, I just don't like the policies. I don't like X, Y, and Z. You know what? We making our own league.
Yeah.
We have the capital.
That's what I'm saying.
They have the capital to make their own league. League. Forget the NBA. NBA is done. It's now it's our league. I mean, what you gonna do?
I mean, like, what is it? 89% of the entire NBA is African American people. I mean, what would you be able to do? You'd be able to do nothing. But I don't know what it is that we're not doing those things. I'm not sure if it's some doors we can't get open. But I think to add to that, though, is like in that time where everything got so messed up. Obviously the war on drugs affected us heavily, right? And then in that exact same time frame, literally like clockwork, you get the Welfare Reform Act, which basically says that if you want these benefits, the father can't be in the house, right? So I just think it's just so coincidental. And then, the rise of feminism, then sexual liberation. And now, it all was so coincidental to the T, to the point where now we're just in this weird spot. We're kind of in limbo as African Americans, where we're so separated ideology wise, like we can't get on one accord. And I made this statement in a video one time. I was talking about just conservative ideas in the African American community, because even me personally, a lot of people would look at my videos and assume that I'm conservative because I have like family values, but I'm not actually conservative per se. I believe in things on both sides. I believe in whatever's going to support my community the best in the country. That's the person that I'm going to support. So who has the better plan for the people in my community? That's who I support. And just when I was talking about it, I made a point that we have these phrases like protect all black women, but yet a lot of the women in our community worship the guys that are part of the problem in our community. Right? They say so often that they like hood dudes, they like bad dudes, they like dudes who do this and do that. And I'm like, well, if you're a guy with traditional family values, you get pushed out of our community. You're not cool.
That's facts.
You're a lame. You don't want to go to the club. You don't want me to shake my butt in public. You're a lame. You're just, and so guys who have well-grounded opinions, 95% of our women voted for Joe Biden in the last election. Now, I'm not trying to get political here, but I'm just saying that then indicates that a lot of our women have more democratic, liberal views. So if you have more conservative family value views, you don't have very many women in our community that you can be with, essentially, because people generally date people that have the same moral values as them. So then they go out into other communities and find other women, and then they exclude themselves from our community because we push them out of our community, right? So it's just like, to fight that kind of, like that, we're just so separated, and to fight that, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna have to have some kind of code towards each other, to the point where we at least value our own struggles before we value other struggles. Like Black women nowadays, or not, I'm not like just going after Black women, I'm just saying like Black women in particular, with their more democratic mindset towards things, are supporting movements ahead of our own. And that's one of the things that Dave Chappelle put on. He did that so well. He represented that you could cancel the baby for saying something bad about a Black man or about the LGBT community, but you ain't gonna cancel him for shooting somebody. He gets famous for shooting somebody in a Walmart, for shooting another Black man in a Walmart, right? So it's like, and I like that he brought that fact up, because that truly shows how much further we put other movements before we put our own. And there's so many people separated on that, in that mindset, that we can't get any traction. We can't get any ground because we're trying to help the women, or help the gay LGBT community, or help the dying whales, or whatever it may be. Like, we just need a little bit of focus on our own problems. And I think we had that focus at some point. But like you said, I think that there were things that were put in place that made it a little harder for us to organize. I think they sat down and they said, hey, let's not have this happen again. Let's go ahead and get rid of the Malcolm X. Let's get rid of the Martin Luther King. And then we're going to just do a little bit of separating here. We don't want them to get a little noisy. We want them to keep quiet, so I don't know. Man.
Yeah, the emasculation of the Black man was not arbitrary. It was not without purpose. It was intended to cause what is happening now. Because when you take the men out of the homes, you take them, you totally destroy a culture.
Yeah.
Okay. Our culture is the only one that we've referred to as being a matriarchy.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the only one. And then if you look disproportionately at the issues that we have, they all stem from that.
Yeah.
And this is not me pointing the finger at Black women or something, or trying to blame anybody. No, they've inherited a bad thing as we have.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And for the most part, they're just doing the best that they can. But if we're going to change this thing and get it back to the way that it should be, you're going to have to be able to get people to come to the table. You said something in one of your last couple videos. This was the video where it's the Black woman. She's actually Black and Hispanic, and she was being interviewed by Kendra G. And so she has, she's got 2 kids by the same guy. She's living with the guy, but they're not together. He's dating other folks, but then she's still trying to find somebody that she wants to be with. She started to say that she wouldn't date somebody that was chubby because she's chubby.
Yeah.
But then as more information came out, it actually, I give her a save on that, because she said that she's trying to get in shape herself, and if she met somebody at the gym and they were chubby but they were both working out together, she'd be cool with that. But it started to look a certain way, and it turned a different way. But one thing that you said, which I thought was a really good point, and it's a point that I've made frequently, is that the feminist movement doesn't seem to be interested in equity in ditch digging jobs or trash collector or those guys that get on the side of skyscrapers and clean the windows. In the illustration you actually used was coal miners.
They don't want black lung. Nobody's out yelling.
Right.
Nobody's screaming for the right to get black lung to mine coal. Like, nobody's doing that, right? Yeah.
And that was I think that's a good point, and it kind of shows what's animating a lot of this. And this is something that I've said before too. It's the idea that early in the feminist movement, there was an attempt to create a separation from the so-called patriarchy and white women.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that if you go back in the history of our country, go back to slavery, the guy, he was the master. He was the CEO, but the wife was the COO.
Yeah.
And often was the case that she was deciding who was getting bread to who and what punishments were going to get doled out. And there's this attempt to create some distance from that reality and to pretend in some way that they were being abused, and they were for fear of their life, they were just following these edicts.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to debate if someone has been abused or something, and I'm not condoning any kind of abuse. That's not what's going on here. But we do know that there is nothing similar about the partnership that white women had on the plantation with their husband.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's no different. There's no comparison between that and the plight of black people.
Yeah.
And to try to create some sort of equivalency is totally ridiculous.
And that's and I said that in one of my videos, Thunder. I said openly that white women are the most spoiled demographic in America. I mean, how could you ever have it any sweeter? And if you look at the beginning of the feminist movement, they never included black women. They never, when they looked for the right to vote, when women got the right to vote, black women didn't have the right to vote. Black women got the right to vote when we got the right to vote. So they on our side, you would think, right? And when you look at like people who had a big say in what happened, especially when it came to sexual liberation and the introduction of the pill, right? The birth control pill. Margaret Sanger, she was openly racist and practiced eugenics. She wanted to get rid of more black babies. She talked about it openly. She was a part of something called the Negro Project. And I wish that more African-American women knew the actual history of feminism, quote unquote, so they would understand that it never has been a movement for them. And even now, I don't think it actually is. I think it's just a way to get in the way of what men are trying to do under the false disguise of equality. Because when you look into it, it isn't really about equality. That's for certain. Right. So
just forthrightly stated, white feminism does not work for black women.
No.
And it was never designed to. And as black women systematically became more allies to that movement, it disproportionately created more issues in our community. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that's interesting, you were mentioning the Republican Democrat thing, and a lot of our women are Democrats, and in truth be told, most of our men are too. So it's like 88% or something of the men voted for Democrats too.
Is that true?
Yeah,
I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
But that being the case, it was still a smaller percentage than it was in the previous election. So. In the election prior to that, so the last two elections.
So wait, when Trump got in?
Yeah, so the last two elections, black men voted more for Republicans than they did for. I'm sorry, there was a higher percentage of them that voted for Republicans, not than the total.
Okay.
So like, say for instance, if 90% of the time in the last say, not the last two elections, but the one before that, say if 90%, I'm saying that 85%.
Yeah.
You know, so it was still pretty significant, but it's still not there. But the issue here is that the Democrats don't really do anything for us. Now, they do a little bit more for black women. And in that little bit more, they're able to sort of, that it's a power game. It's an intentional trying to divide our community and trying to create these wedges that make it harder and harder for us to communicate, and further emasculate us as men. Okay, that's what's going on there. Now I'm more of a black nationalist, and so in my mind, there are issues that must be there, or I can't even look at you. I've been a third-party voter for probably the last 15, 20 years, and if I can't see how black men and boys are specifically the priority of a policy, I don't even want to talk to you about it.
Oh yeah, good luck. I ain't seen one of them in forever.
Well, so
crazy.
and I realize that, and that's why I can't vote for Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah,
is because neither one of them are really interested in putting forward. Look, the Republicans try to talk this family values. They try to talk tough, like they're
accountability.
Yeah. Like they're sort of against the feminist thing, but no, they're not. No, they're not. I mean, if you they're just as much bought into that as the other party. They just can't be seen saying certain things.
Yeah.
And to the extent that the parties have so fully embraced those principles, it's going to be disproportionately bad for us.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Every single experiment that the government does, when other communities get the cold, we get the flu.
Yeah. And what's very interesting to me is the fact that you kind of reap what you sow in this situation, because of course we were the first affected by the kind of feminist wave and the demasculinization of men and men being taken out of the household, which I think was probably one of the worst things that could have happened to us, because we know the statistics of when a father isn't in the household. Now, you know, we're talking about chances of graduating plummeting. Right, we're talking about the chances of going to jail for a violent crime almost triples. We're talking about the chances of going to prison in general almost quadruples. The chances of a girl who's raised in a fatherless home getting pregnant before the age of 18 is 3 times more likely than a girl that was raised with her father. And the list goes on when it comes to ending yourself, for lack of words for YouTube, and just every single statistic that you could imagine in terms of drug abuse, domestic violence, anything that you can think of that's bad, it happens when the father isn't in the home. And that's what happened to us first, but it's happening amongst other communities now. And now you see people kind of trying to panic and trying to get everything together, but we're swirling, we're going around the drain, and it's very interesting to see. I think that this is the reason why red pill communities are thriving more than ever, because men are being disenfranchised and nobody's talking about it. And I think it's actually happening to every race now, which is very interesting. There's a study that because I'm doing a video that's going to be out tomorrow on where I'm reacting to the Jordan Peterson interview that he did on the roommates.
I still haven't seen that. I have that marked. I have to watch that because Jordan. Yeah. I like both of those guys.
Yeah, they're really interesting. But I was kind of disappointed in Jordan Peterson's approach to this one. It almost seemed like he was not willing to go where he was supposed to go with the conversation, because he wanted to put it more on the self-accountability, because he's more of a clinical psychologist, so he looks at things from an individual perspective, so he has a harder time looking at things from the bigger picture in terms of sociology. At least that's what he made it seem like in this interview, and that's why I was kind of disappointed. Because basically he was like, when the roommates asked him about how he felt, and I'm just paraphrasing, how he felt about average men not having opportunities with average women anymore, he basically said, well, that's all on the men, right? And But to some degree, when you have it to the point where, and he was basically saying the women are right. If they're not selecting you, it's because they're right. You're wrong. And he literally says that word for word. You got to do something different with your attire. Like you got to dress better or do whatever. And I'm like, here's the thing. And I brought up this graph and it will be in the video tomorrow. If you guys are watching this today, you guys can go check it out. There was a graph that's been taken from polls on Tinder. And just people reacting to Tinder profiles. And it shows that if a man is 5'4", he has a 90% rejection rate. He has a 90% rejection rate if he's 5'4". That means, and that's just solely based on height. That means they don't care about how much you make. They don't care about how good of a person you are. They don't care about how many times you walk your dog. They don't care about anything. They just care about the fact that you're 5'4". 90% of those women, if he approaches 100 women, 90% of those women are going to reject him just based off his height. And at about 5'8", it kind of levels out at about 50%, right? And I showed the graph. I don't have it on me now. I wouldn't be able to pull it up, but it goes to about 50% if you're about 5'8". So he's saying that women are selective and this is a good thing, but I'm basically saying, well, what are they selecting men based on? Because in the comments, you see a lot of women saying, oh, he's right. We're all right. Men are wrong. You guys are just jealous. You're not, you got to do better. You got to make more money. And I brought up the fact that in the red pill community, we tell women to be selective, but we tell women to be selective in the right ways. We often tell women don't get pregnant unless you have a ring. We often tell women don't get pregnant by a man who doesn't have a car. We often say if the man has nice shoes and no car, then his priorities are probably in the wrong places. That's probably not the guy you want to sleep with, right? But all of that's ignored when we say it. But when Jordan Peterson basically says that all men are wrong and women are supposed to be selective because they bear the bulk of the responsibility in terms of their body when they get pregnant. Yeah, that makes sense. And we teach women to be selective, but what are you selecting based on? Because if I'm a team manager and I'm selecting a wide receiver, but I'm judging based off passing accuracy, I'm selective, but I'm not selective about the right things. And I brought up that graph to show that women are selective, yes, but women are losing in 2021, not because they have standards. They're losing because they only have standards when the guy is not attractive. When the guy is attractive, they don't got any standards. They'll go do whatever it takes to get that guy, right? But when the guy has, isn't attractive, then they have standards. And so average men just don't have the same access to women that they used to. And what happens is it's going to turn into more of a polygamous society. And in polygamous societies, when the men have, and Jordan Peterson says this himself, and I put that clip in there where he says this specifically, in polygamous societies where a small minority of men have all the selection with women, they generally don't form good relationships with those women. And I say, well, I see that reflected in the fact that 40% of women are having children out of wedlock now. And that percentage is like 70% in the African-American community. Those men are not committing to those women. And the average men who have no commitment to society, or the average men that are not getting any sexual selection, they lose commitment to society. Why would I go fight in your war if I don't have anything to protect? Why would I go work 60 hours a week if I have no family to bring any money back to? You know what I'm saying? So more and more men are just dropping out of the race. So why is there an increase in single motherhood, but a decrease of men having sex with women? 30% of men at the age of 30 will be virgins. Think about that. 30% of men at the age of 30 will be virgins. That means never having touched a woman, let alone had the privilege to have children. Yet we see a rise in single motherhood. Why is that? It's probably because a small minority of the men are the ones that are getting a lot of the sexual selection, and they don't have any commitment to those women. It is what it is. So. Yeah,
I heard Kevin use a stat in our community saying that 16% of the men are impregnating 80% of the women in our community.
That's a bold stat. I'd need to see that one. I don't know, Kev.
Yeah,
I believe you're telling the truth, man, but you got to show me something about that one. I didn't see that one yet.
Well, it makes sense if you consider that in all of recorded history, only 40% of men have procreated, whereas close to 90% of women have.
Yeah.
So, and that's before the the internet,
right.
And dating apps, right? So, on one hand, I can sort of sense the logic that Jordan is relying on in his assessment, because evolution doesn't care.
No.
And evolution will do what evolution is going to do.
Yeah. You ain't going to change a woman's mind about what she wants. So it is what it is. You got to just do what you got to do.
Right. So I and then it's like sort of evolution on steroids because of the dating apps and how that creates even a wider chasm. So I wouldn't be surprised if within the next, if things don't change, within the next 30 to 40 years, if that 40% stat I just said is down to closer to 20%. Because, and that's in keeping with the Pareto principle, right?
Yeah.
That 80-20 rule. So yeah, it's pretty funky.
Yeah, I'd say there's another Tinder, another data set taken from Tinder, and it showed that the top 1% of men get 16% of all of the likes and interactions. The top 5% of men get 41% of all the likes and interaction, and the top 10% of men get 60% of all of the likes and interactions, right? And the bottom 50% of men get a whopping 4% total of likes and interactions. And I'm like, that's probably just those girls that go on there for ego. You know, sometimes people go on there for self-validation. They swipe and then they never really have any interest in the people. They just want to basically self-validate themselves and say, hey, I'm pretty still, you know what I mean? And get some kind of validation. So I would assume that small 4% that the 50% of men are fighting over are probably those pages. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be similar to what you see in college, you know, where men were blamed for all of the problems and told that's the solution to all the problems were to just work harder. And then they found out that at the end of the day, all you get is $60,000 of debt and a degree that a lot of people don't use when they get out of college. And they said, hey, let's just not go to college anymore. I think that's what's happening when you look at men just kind of dropping out of just social circles. They just don't want to do it anymore because the solutions is only always for men to just work harder. We don't look at the family court system and say, hey, if we want more marriages, maybe, and we're talking about this thing called equality, maybe 90% of the time, which is a real stat, by the way, 90% of the time, the women shouldn't get custody of the children. You know what I mean? Because then women have nothing to lose from divorce. So why wouldn't you quit on something that's already hard, right? And you see them doing that at 70%. And that rate increases the more educated a woman gets. So it just makes sense to me that then if you have nothing to lose and everything to gain in terms of alimony, child support, you get to keep your kids, you get half his pension, you get to keep the house. Why wouldn't you want a divorce if you're a woman? And then you get to go on Instagram and see Megan Thee Stallion living her best life, quote unquote. She gets the purses and you say, hey, I could do that. Why am I sitting here doing this hard stuff with him when I could just take all his money and get monthly payments and get to keep my kids and go live a happy sexual liberation life? And so, and I don't think that that's a real thing. I think it's something that's just promoted to women using social media. And I could go deeper in that, but that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, man, I just think that we could do so many more things like 50-50 custody. If everybody's equal and everything's the same, why haven't we discussed 50-50 custody? Oh, well, it's because the state gets 66% of every dollar that a man gives in child support. So no one's going to discuss that because the state wants to keep sucking up government funds. So it's like all of these things, you just follow the money a lot of the times and you see what happens. It turns out that if you convince women to care about materials more than family, you get more people to buy things, and then you get more people in the workforce, right? So the only people who win in this situation, humans are the number one resource on the planet. Forget gold or diamonds. Humans are the best resource on the planet. The only people who win are these giant corporations that get more labor, they get more sales, and people are less and less happy, and people that are insecure and unhappy will buy more things, unfortunately. So it's just like, stay in your house. Amazon will deliver your package for you. Don't go outside because there's a scary virus out there. Don't talk to your family. Just do it on the app where we can turn you off whenever you get a little mouthy. It's like,
I interviewed BGS Ibmore, and that episode was called Can the Black Community Be Saved? And we were talking about the feminization of the education system. And he chronicles, this dude is brilliant. Like he's like read everything. So he details. So in the education system, there was an issue where white boys were not being served. And we're talking K through 12. They were not being served, and so they decided that they were going to change it to help the white boys. And so they made the adjustments, and then it really helped. And they were producing at better rates, closer to the girls. And then what happened was they decided to revert, and So they changed back to what they were doing before, and they knew what the results were going to be. Now you fast forward and you see that all the colleges, the universities, the education system period has taken on this much more feminized approach to education, which further disenfranchises the boys, the men. And a point to make about that, and this is a little known statistic, but in high school, 93% of the valedictorians and class presidents are female.
Wow.
93%.
Wow.
93%. And this is not a new statistic. It's not from a new study. This has been known for a long time. It's almost as appalling as the fact that affirmative action, which was a program designed specifically to help black men, the beneficiaries of affirmative action, 84% were white women.
Wow.
84%. Now, if you create a program and it doesn't go the way you think it was going to go, maybe there's some weird stuff in the weeds that's holding stuff up, there's some logistics or something you need to tweak, then you fix those things and you say, okay, it's going to be more effective to the goal, right? We want to serve black men. We don't want to just be serving 84% white women. But when they found out that it was disproportionately serving white women, they doubled down. They didn't change it. They doubled down because that wasn't that offensive. And when you consider Title IX, and which was really supposed to be about sports, it turned into this huge other thing. And that's actually how white women were accepted as a minority group, is because of some of the language in Title IX. So that's how, Green Gorilla, a shout out to him, he coined this term, white woman energy, on one of his streams a couple weeks ago. And it's actually not intended to be derogatory to white women. What he's saying is that there is a particular agenda that certain elite white women have launched, and it's the same approach that all of these other groups are using. And I said I interviewed Minister Japp, and in that interview, one thing that he mentioned was, one of the reasons why folks try to cozy up to white women is because if you're their ally, you get the same treatment as the white woman.
Really?
And so it's a power game.
That's interesting.
And they're playing 4D chess, and we're still playing checkers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to look into that then. Do you have something I can read on that about this kind of thing that they're trying to do as far as grabbing power in some kind of way, some kind of systematic way? Are there any groups in particular that you can look at that or pinpoint that might be pretty effective at it? Is it the feminist movement as a whole? Is that part of it?
Yeah. So of course there's different aspects of the feminist movement. I'm not opposed to 100% of the feminist movement. The first wave feminists, I'm totally in support.
Absolutely. Right.
Right to vote, property ownership, the ability to get equal pay for the same job, all of that stuff. I have no issue with that. No problem. It's all the stuff that came afterwards.
The right to vote was an interesting. The right to vote was an interesting one because it didn't come with the same stipulations. Even though it was for equality, it came without having to register for the draft, which I am for, because I don't believe that women, me personally, I don't believe that women should fight in wars. I think that that's just a thing that men do. I think that if you look at all the numbers in terms of men on or women on the, or men versus women on the front lines, men are definitely more suited to do the job, statistically speaking. So, and if your women are on the front lines, what do you have to fight for, right? But I do think that that was very interesting, that that was supposed to be about equality, but even that, you seen kind of a leg up on the women's side in terms of they didn't have to register for the draft. So, you know, like even from there, you kind of start to see it start to favor more of the women, the quote unquote equality movement, you know? But yeah, I was definitely for the first wave feminism too. It's just that we've drifted so far from that. It's insane.
Right. And the same sort of, so basically what's happened is we figured out some things, the black community figured out some things in the civil rights movement. And these other groups have basically used our strategies and been more effective. They've been more effective at using our strategies.
Oh yeah.
That's basically what's happened to us.
Yeah.
And I know you got to get going. I did want to ask you or mention maybe one or two other things. So there was a couple things. One of them is, I know you're a husband.
Yes, sir.
I am too. Okay, and and there's a number of us in this space that are either married and therefore advocates of marriage, or aren't married yet but are advocates. So of course Kevin Samuels is an advocate of marriage. Ike Ogiamian, who's about to have a baby pretty soon here.
Really? Congrats to Ike. I gotta go talk to him then. I didn't know he was about to have a baby. That's good for him.
Yeah. And Rollo Tomasi, of course. The roommates have been supporters of marriage. They're not married, but they're.
I know Anton Daniels
supporters.
is married. He's huge on it.
That's right. O'Shea Duke Jackson he's a supporter of the idea of marriage. Now he'll be quick to roast roast folks that need to get roasted for bad behavior. Mumia Obsidian Ali, he seems to be in support of the idea of marriage.
Yeah,
even
Obsidian has a great book, by the way, and actually I bought that one. Yeah, it's a really interesting book. I actually liked it a lot. It had a lot of interesting things in there. So shout out to Obsidian for that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, so anyhow, how does now you also have folks like Donovan Sharp, who is in a long-term relationship, but he's not going to get married. I mean, he's been adamant about that. And then you have folks like CGA, who is trying to convince everybody that marriage is a bad deal.
Yeah.
Though
even MTR, he doesn't like marriage either. MTR is not for marriage.
So it seems to me there's a bit of a divide there. First of all, does your wife know about this red pill stuff? And I'm curious as to what her thoughts are.
Oh yeah, I talk to her about it all the time, and she's often here. She just left, but she's often here and tiptoeing around as I'm on these live streams or when I'm making videos. Yeah, we talk about this stuff all the time. I think that it's important for both sides, both men and women, to understand their shortcomings in terms of human nature and their natural impulses in order to fight them. So I know coming into more income, that having more income, I'm going to have more options with women, but that never really was a problem for me because I was already a professional athlete and Division I athlete and all those other things. But even then, you know, just me knowing that it's in human nature for men to get around a little bit when they have options. That means, since I'm aware of that, I am more able to navigate that space, since I'm not just caught off guard. For her as well, because we know of certain things, certain traps, you know. I think it helps relationships, in all honesty, when a man and a woman can get together and have these discussions, these difficult discussions. And a lot of the things that I say, she agrees with. So, and I've kind of we've had enough conversations for her, and I've presented enough decent information to her for her to understand my ideas, and that I'm not doing it maliciously. Because I think that's the beginning of a lot of it. I think that a lot of times when we speak to Black women in particular, because the feminist movement has programmed so many women in general to believe that when a man has any criticism, it is a part of the patriarchy, or it is him trying to control you, and you ain't got to listen to no man, or whatever it may be. So it makes it a little difficult to break that first layer, where you have to then prove to them that I believe that I'm for the best of my people. You know what I mean? And I promote marriage because I think that that's the best way to build communal wealth. I think that's one of the best ways to ensure that a man is going to stay in the household with his children. And I think the statistics and data support all of that. I think that when you're raising children, that's the best way to raise the best balanced children. Now, is it broken? Should there be some things that are changed? Yes. But I believe that a man's role has always been to sacrifice. And if I want what's going to be best for my future heir, or whoever's going to be next after me, I got to do what I got to do. And I think I chose the right woman too. So I did do some choosing. I tried to choose well as well. I didn't just go out and pick anybody. I got a person that I felt like could have these difficult conversations and is willing to adapt to certain requirements that I might have because of what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean? So she just recently quit her job. And she didn't want to do that because she likes her quote unquote independence, or whatever it may be. She likes to have her own income, basically. But with her doing that, now when I have to remember birthdays, or I have to remember I have a live with Dr. Thunder, or I have to remember, you know, that there are certain tasks in my life where we gotta fly to Florida or wherever we gotta go. She handles all that. So that makes my life easier, so I can continue to make more money and continue to do what I'm doing as far as my reach towards people. So we just have this kind of dynamic where we work together, and I think that that's the most efficient thing for people to do. And specifically, I think it's the most efficient way for men to make more money, and I think the stats and statistics show that too. Married men make more money than any other demographic of men. So I think that, you know. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, we do have the conversation about that.
And yeah, and then my last question is, well, I'll give you a little context. So I have a video series on my YouTube channel called Blue Pill Testimonials, and there's 10 videos, and basically they're basically, shout out to Solo TV 84, they're basically simp tales. I have kissed a lot of frogs. I also believe that I found the right one, but I had to kiss a lot of frogs on the way. And and you know, the reason that I did those videos, you know, I hide the identity of the people that were involved. But the reason I did it is because it's a really isolating sort of experience going through that stuff as a man, because there's not really places to talk about it, or at least there weren't when I was going through those things. Yeah. And I think it's important for young men to know that even people that seem like they're together, you know, I'm a tenured professor, you know, Dr. Thunder, I actually have a doctorate. That's not just for marketing. And, you know, so it seems like I have stuff together and everything. But hey, I've had the same struggles in dealing with this sort of unregulated dating market. Now, granted, I cashed out right in time.
Yeah.
It got way worse real quick. Like I got with my wife like right when texting just started to be a thing.
Oh yeah.
So after that, that's when it went like that. So what I'm asking is, I'm sure you haven't only had positive experiences.
Well, in all honesty, here's the thing. I started dating my wife when I was a sophomore and she was a freshman.
Oh.
So, yeah, we're one of those weird stories where we just were together for a very long time. She's the only woman that I've ever slept with. I don't think I've ever said that before. She's the only woman I've ever slept with because I don't want to mess up. Well, in all honesty, and I am going to answer the question too, because I'm trying to think of something too that I might be able to say. Because even if you're in a relationship, you can still have those situations where you got to go, hey, this ain't right. We got to lay down the law. So, but one of the reasons, like in terms of just me cheating, and the reason why I haven't is because it's mostly selfish reasons. It's because I feel like if I were to do it, I would realize that I could get away with it. And then if I felt like I could get away with it, I would continue to do it. And then I might become a different person. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to start to become a different person and have different values because now I'm seeking coochie. You know what I mean? Like, that's not something that I wanted to do ever. So I've always been trying to be focused and very goal oriented. And I think just me being with her has always helped me do that because I don't need to chase it. You know what I mean? Like, when I was in college, I seen a lot of guys mess up because they were chasing it, you know, and they weren't as focused on running or track or school or whatever it may have been, because they were chasing it. So I think that, you know, helped me a lot. And that's one of the reasons personally why I didn't cheat. But I'm trying to think of a story where I've simped or something like that happened. I can tell you the story of when I realized that it's kind of a simp story, but it doesn't have anything to do with women. It's when I realized human nature. And I realized that you can't really be nice to everybody. I had a roommate. I went off to college my freshman year, and at this time, I'm a very goal-oriented person. So I'm not very social. I don't really care to go to parties. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that does, like, he break dances in the gym by himself and does flips and reads a lot and watches a lot of YouTube and stuff like that. That was me as a person. So just with that ignorance of how other people work, I was always so nice to people, right? And I found out very quickly that you can't be nice. You have to be a good man, not always a nice man, though. Those are two very different things. And my roommate, he had like a group of people that would always come in. And when you go to college, the first thing people do is act fake so that they can find friends, and they all try to act like the same person. And I've always observed that, and I've just sat and watched that happen. And then after a couple of weeks, their real personalities come out and they find out they hate each other, then they start beefing. But his group of friends at this time, they would come into the room and they would ask me for things. They would say, hey, can I have a Hot Pocket? Yeah, no problem, no big deal. Can I have a toaster strudel? Yeah, no problem, no big deal. Go ahead, get what you want. Can I use your cologne? Yeah, no problem, no big deal, right? But one night in particular, there was a guy that, well, okay, what first happened is I was walking to practice one day, and because they were also on the track team, and one of the dudes said, why are you always looking at him and you always smiling? You must be gay or something like that. Just because I'm a happy person. Like, I'm generally a pretty happy person. They said, why are you always smiling? And when you looking at him, I'm like, well, I just smile all the time. I'll just be chilling. I don't really be worried about nothing. And they go, oh, you must be gay. We finna jump you or something like that. Something along those lines. And they obviously didn't think that I was gay, but they wanted to get under my skin and try to threaten me or kind of push me to that limit. And that's when I kind of started to dial it down and start to realize, oh, people are going to take advantage of you. And then that exact same night, they went and they decided to use all of my cologne, pretty much all of my cologne on their clothes, literally just laying it out and just spraying all over. And then as I was leaving, the guy asked me for a Hot Pocket, and this time I told him no, and he wasn't used to that. And so I left and I came back, and it was my last Hot Pocket. And when I seen that there wasn't any Hot Pockets left, I pretty much took it to that level where I was like, okay, this is where it goes. And I went to his room and I tried to get him to come out, and he wouldn't come out. And so it's stupid now that I think about it, but I started punching his door until I almost broke my fist. My knuckles was bleeding, all this and that, because I'm just mad that I just found out that when you're nice, people will take advantage of you. And that's pretty much been my sentiment for the rest of my life. I'm a good person. I treat people nice and I treat people fair, but if I feel like you're trying to take advantage of me, you gonna know. And if you want to take it there, then we can take it there every time. And so since then, I had another situation where I was on the team, and a dude that was a senior or a junior on the team, whatever he was, he tried to hold my head down under the water when we was drinking at the water fountain, because it's track practice, right? So I was drinking at the water fountain. He went to hold my head down under the water, and I got up and I pushed him, and then he got back up and he thought that we was gonna start fighting. And I basically told him, well, if you push my head down, you gonna get pushed. Like, what do you mean? You thought you wasn't gonna get hit back? And people, applauded me for standing up to him because I guess he was the team bully or whatever. But you just start to realize as a guy, and every guy has that experience, like you said, where you realize everything that people told you about women and everything that people told you about people as a man. Because like you said, growing up in the American school system, you're generally speaking around women. you don't really have that many male figures, especially if you're growing up in a single family household. So you're taught to have these certain ideals and to be kind all the time and to be nice to people, and people aren't going to take advantage of you, which are pretty much feminine ideals, but you don't know that as a man. You think that if you treat a woman nice all the time, that she'll like you. And you find out when you get a little older that when you treat women too nice, they begin to take advantage of you. And yeah, so you just find every man has that moment where you have that realization, and it's good that there's a space for it now. But I seen a lot of bad things in college. I mean, I'm talking about women that were in relationships for 3 years, coming to college, their freshman year, having sex with my teammates in his truck. I mean, you ain't even make it upstairs to the bed. You just did it in the truck, you know, and she was a virgin, and she was supposedly with this guy and holding off on him because she wanted to keep her virginity, and then slept with my teammate in his truck. And he probably, the guy that got cheated on, probably doesn't even know. I've seen all kinds of stuff in college with this stuff. And that's when I really started to wake up. I seen a girl come to me crying. And she came to me crying because her boyfriend cheated on her, when everybody on our team knew that she was cheating as well. So she sat there and she cried. And then I told her straight up, well, you cheated on him too. At least you know that he cheated on you. And you sitting here crying, and he never knew that she cheated on him, right? So he thinks that he's the bad guy, he's been doing wrong, but she's been cheating on him for months now. Everybody knows that he's the laughingstock, and he doesn't know. So, you know, every guy has that moment where you find out, and it's usually a very painful moment. And I'm happy that there's a space for it. But you can always tell when there's those guys in the comments, though. Those guys that are probably just gotten hurt, and they're saying all kinds of crazy stuff that I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand their frustrations, I guess. Yeah. They might be taking it too far, though. I'm like, oh, y'all got to calm down.
Yeah. Yes. Sometimes I think people, they may have an initial experience with the space where there's a lot of like red pill raging going on.
Yeah.
And that's not really the best example of what I think actually takes place in the space. Yes, there are folks that are venting. There are folks that, you know, they just found out that their, you know, wife has been cheating, and now she, you know, gets the house, she gets the kids, gets his pension. He's, you know, staying in a car, you know, doesn't get to see his kids like he used to. Spent all of his money
and has to pay child support.
Family, right? And has to pay child support. And yeah, I mean, everybody, I think sometimes you need a chance to be able to vent, and maybe in retrospect, maybe online is not necessarily the best place to do that because there's like a permanent record of it.
Yeah.
But I also understand why people do that. I mean, women have had outlets like forever. You know, besides the fact that women tend to want to talk to each other about that stuff. But look at all daytime TV, man. It's, you know, The View, you know, The Talk, all of these shows that really cater to that stuff. And show me in mainstream media, show me where men have that kind of, you know, platform. They just don't.
No way.
And so I'm always a little frustrated when people, you know, that are already they already think that they're going to be against what's going on anyway. They come into the space, and then it's like, but why did you have to say it that way? And why did you have to say it that in this other way? It's like, look, I'm free to say what I want to say about these topics, and I'm not saying it for you as an audience. This is for men, and we're talking about things that we want to talk about the way we want to talk about them. And so what's the problem with that?
Yeah.
If you can't handle that, if that's not what you want to deal with, we're not going to talk to you about that. You know, you can go somewhere else and just allow us to at least have one thing, one place where we can do that.
Anytime men have discussions, it's militant. Anytime there's a category of men that have discussions about anything, especially if they criticize a protected group, which is what women are considered according to YouTube's policies, anytime that's happening, we're militant. And that's just the very opposite case here. I think from my experience in Red Pill, there are some bad apples, and those people should not be on the platforms or have the platforms they have. But I believe that those people should say whatever they feel and should be able to, actually. So I shouldn't say that. They should be able to say whatever they want, regardless of how ridiculous it is. But so there are some extremist platforms, don't get me wrong, and usually those are the ones that the media likes to take or people like to take and point fingers at. But for the most part, we tell men exactly what they need to hear. We tell men to be better. We tell men to try to make more money, try to dress a little better, try to smell a little better, try to do a little better. We tell women to ask for a ring before you get before you have a man's children. We tell women
and wed before you bed.
Yes. And it's just like we tell these women, we tell people what I would consider to be positive things, especially if you truly want traditional family values, you know. And I think that there are a lot of women who don't really know what it takes to be a wife. They just think that because they can get men to get in their bed, that they know what it takes to have a long-term relationship. And a lot of them don't. And then a lot of them are also being taught that to have a long-term relationship means to just get free things from this man instead of giving anything. So they come into the situation understanding what they want, but not really understanding what they have to offer. You know, and I think that's brought out very often with the what do you bring to the table question. And you can see from a lot of women's response that they never even thought about that. They've never even pondered the idea that you would have to give something in a marriage, you know, and I think that speaks volumes. And I think that the red pill space has done its job. And I think it's going to continue to do its job. And as men continue to be disenfranchised, and as men continue to not get equal opportunities, and as men continue to be silenced, the space is going to continue to grow. And I think we just beat the big media outlets to the punch. They're going to follow pretty soon if they don't already. Because you seen the Shaq University, Love University thing. You see the big names starting to try to get in on the pie. You see Kawhi Brown, or what's his name, Kwame Brown, kind of coming out a little bit. And I know he's always been very Republican, very, you know, in your face, but it definitely opened up a platform when you have other guys that look like him having these same conversations. So I think the more we have these conversations, the more people are going to understand that we're not militant, we're harmless. If anything, we do more good than we do bad. I truly think that, and that's the reason why I do it. If I actually thought that I was doing bad, I wouldn't do it, you know. So
well, I want to respect your time, and you gave me some bonus time actually, and I appreciate that. And I feel like we barely scratched the surface. There's a bunch of stuff I have written down here that we didn't even touch. So I'm going to have you back sometime soon. And if you want me to return the favor, I certainly will. So anyhow, God bless you. Thanks for the interview, and we'll be talking.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Thunder.
All right, man.